Hello and welcome to this new episode of Metal Essentials. Joining me today is Fiello. You may remember him from his brief brutal death metal analysis article he did for the site some time ago. Thanks for joining us today, Fiello.
It's a pleasure.
Today we're going to be doing like a very special album, what's it called? Bethlehem Dictius Te Necare. Rest in peace, Jürgen Bartsch, who unfortunately, lost a long battle against I think they never specified what disease he had, but I think he had quite a few health complications. And that was a bit of a shock, right?
Yeah, no, tragic. Very. I mean, he accomplished, right? He accomplished what he set out to do. So, and that may he rest in peace now.
Yeah, definitely. So let's get into this. So let's do a little bit of a background. Did you ever get a chance to listen to any of their demos?
Oh, that's a maybe long ago, but I don't think I recall.
You know, I listened to them. So there's
Mhm.
essentially pretty much two demos, and then there's like a bunch of reissues of those demos under different names, right?
Mhm.
Um, so both, so the funny thing, so the first demo, right, has a song called can't remember what it was. Wait, let me just find it quickly. Yeah, Rigor Mortis, which is really funny because that song would never appear anywhere else, whereas
Yeah.
Supplementary Exegesis and would actually appear on the other demo, on the tour, on the other demo, and on Dark Metal as well. So yeah,
Mhm.
so it's a funny thing because you listen to that demo, right? They're a very different band than what they became. It's a lot more kind of like what's the word? Peaceville 3 style, right?
Yes.
I'm not sure if you've heard it. There's
Okay.
like no black metal influence yet. We're still, still very anchored in kind of Death Doom, you know, and eventually, they would get onto dark metal. So, what are your thoughts on dark metal?
Well, I yeah. So there's the Peaceville 3, right? I looked at an interview online that I read with Jürgen, where he states that you know there is there is a comparison drawn, right? But so to me, dark metal it's a bit slower than Dictus. That's the first thing.
Mm.
It's a bit slower. The vocalist is another vocalist also.
Yeah, Andreas, who was like on all the demos and everything. And
Yes,
yeah.
yes. And so for me, the main thing with dark metal is that it doesn't it doesn't have these dramatic moments necessarily, but you can tell that that's where the band is going. It's it's a I don't know how to describe this. I think I might have told you in the group chat. There is an almost gothic got like it's a I don't know if gothic is the word, but it's a very they don't they don't treat the clean channel passages as interludes.
Mm.
They so this is something that I noticed in the on Dictius that they seem to have doubled down on for the better. Is that I think it's Tagebuch.
Yeah.
It's
The
that
sixth
one.
song, yeah.
Yeah, you can see it's the soundtrack of a ruined life. While I was listening to it, I was I was scrolling Instagram and I came up on this video of a spider that's been taken by a fungus.
Mm.
And I just found it so fitting. It's so to me it also fits with the biographical data that we have of the songwriter of Jürgen, rest in peace. He has this very uh, it it's very melancholic. It's very you can feel the black bile building up in you as you listen to it. It's and I think that those clean passages they never descend into this dramatic sentimentalism. Like they stay in a very they're a very good space for a vocalist like Landferman, who came after, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And it's just, I don't know. It's an interesting development, but I think that dark metal is very close, and it's more and Dictius, they're more close, perhaps to heavy metal
Mm.
or what we deem gothic rock than or like dark wave, post punk, that kind of thing. There seems to be a little bit of convergent evolution going on there because the other more distorted passages, they're to me they're Dark Throne 2 and 3. It they're very like rocking, you know, it's like very trance like, very they don't if you're going to look at black metal as the as a culmination of heavy metal and rock and roll, like it it has this atavistic approach, like it grooves, but it never becomes a beat, you know, like it's if anything, Dictius is the more restrained album. Dark metal takes its liberties, and not that it experiments more, but it ultimately doesn't achieve what Dictius achieves. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I see exactly what you mean because I think, I mean, I love dark metal as well, but I think what holds it back compared to Dictius is it it's way too constrained within the kind of the definition of what extreme metal was at the time. You know, it's not like you said. I think what Dictius and what the rest of Bethlehem's discography would show is like, hey, we can use a lot of very kind of grooving rock and rollisms in our music to great and like devastating effect. Whereas I always felt that, you know, dark metal, it sticks to this idea of doom metal a lot, quite, you know, very, there's no syncopation, you know, it's just very straightforward power chords, you know, not playing
Yes.
with the beat as much. It's stuck. Obviously, I don't think they're doing as much with the interludes, and it's a lot more palatable for someone who wants, you know, more traditional extreme metal. Whereas, you know, Dictius Te Necare, it seems that like all the rules are just thrown out completely.
Yes. And to that, I do want to add also that there's no blast beats. You notice that?
Yeah.
It's it's the most they will go is so you know it. I don't know how many albums have been reviewed here that aren't spoken about on the DLA archive. I'm sure Bethlehem, they're not on the DLA.
N Nah, they were kind of like pushed aside for incorporating way too much rock music, which is
Yeah,
always the kind of, because the DLA always saw rock as being this very kind of dirty thing and something you wanted to distance yourself from as much as possible.
yes, yes, I agree. And still, I think that the DLA has one point to make about black metal. And I don't know if it applies to every local scene, but when it comes to black metal, there is a purported folk element.
Mm.
And I think that's probably a more apparent in more recent, you know, the whole folk metal thing seems to draw a lot from black metal, like, you know, from Bathory to, you know, Campfire and that kind of like Viking metal they call it, right?
Yeah.
But in this case, if you look at black metal at that point, and there was a Brazilian scene, there's a Norwegian, Sweden, Greece, the Germans don't seem to have this. I don't think they don't seem to have the same organization, because Bethlehem, they do seem to have been very influenced by black metal. I think Norway was important for them, as the early acts, you know, Celtic Frost, Sarcophago, um, you know, that kind of, even the Tormentor, like the first wave, right?
Yeah, I mean, Jürgen's like previous band was called Morbid Vision, which I obviously, which sounds like a reference to the first Sepultura album.
Yeah,
Mm.
and you know, before that, he was in a in a glam metal band and like a sleaze band, he calls it. He he did have previous experience. That's something I found out, and I think that as a that did help him. I think know what he wants and what he doesn't want. So I think that you can find your voice in a scene that is otherwise not as unified, or they're not as close to each other, because you have absurd, you have
Mm.
ungod, dark fortress, and I mean I couldn't name many more
I think
many more black metal bands in that region.
Morgan. I'm not sure if you've heard from that like late 80s, early 90s. Bathory worship, complete Bathory worship.
I don't know that. You'll have to send me that one after
Yeah,
because I've never heard that.
yeah. Because you know it is. You are right. It always felt like German black metal. The only thing that feels like it ties them together is Bathory. I think that's like the only
Yes.
reference point they have, most of them. And unironically, the Teutonic thrash stuff was better translated within Norway than within Germany.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that Germany has the. So I think that if you ask a German, and perhaps an older German, the opinion is going to be that heavy metal, especially black metal, is associated at times with an extreme, or not extreme, but let's call it far right politics.
Yeah,
You know,
probably.
and whether you can take that, whether you can necessarily distance aesthetics from ethics and say, uh, oh, the principles of black metal are there, and they will sing about what black metal is about, but the music will not sound like black metal. Then will it really be black metal? Same thing with any genre, really. If you're if you're writing, I don't know, son is typical music in certain parts of Latin America. There's rhythms, and there's a region where it's from, and there's lyrical themes of the places it's from, and I'm sure certain principles behind the music can be extrapolated and applied to another style. But that is where my issue comes in with eclecticism. Is it really the same thing? And for that matter, I think that the black metal bands that did develop in Germany, they had their ethic, their ethos, and their aesthetic indulgences. They were different than Norwegians. I think that there's a different history, and there's a different culture, and there's a different personal background that will make for the music being different. I think the places where it took off, Brazil, Greece, Norway, especially France also,
Mm.
it's a different mentality than what was going on in Germany. That is why the bands that are really well known, you have Absurd, who do fit into the far right, the motif,
Mm.
and then you have Bethlehem, who I think that there's an extreme mindset. I couldn't tell you what the ethics behind it are, because it's very abstract music lyrically. He's a very eloquent writer, from what I understand, and the lyrics are also quite personal. So I'm not sure what can fully be interpreted from it. That said, I think that the challenges of having a black metal band at the time for Bethlehem, who were accused of Satanism and encouraging suicide and all these things.
Yeah, yeah. There,
It,
there was a court case for no, no, not a court case. There was, I think,
there,
a
there was a
mother.
ban.
Yeah, there was a ban
Mhm.
because a mother complained because she claimed that her son was building satanic altars or some stupid nonsense.
Yeah, yeah. That's the and I think that there was this shock value that bands were exploiting at the time, that you can't blame. Like you can't really blame someone. It's the same as when Marilyn Manson was accused of encouraging the was it no, was a Columbine shootings.
Yeah.
Only because one of the perpetrators was a listener of his music. Like, yeah, but that it's a I don't know, man. But yeah, it I think that it's one of those things that Bethlehem's music, it had to follow a certain path. Like I think that despite the extremity and the torment and the sheer emotion present in Dictius, it never it never what's the word? It never crashes. It never I don't know. I don't have the word with me right now, but it never descends into ridicule.
Yeah,
You know?
it's a very hard one because also I think one of the things you know when I went back to it, I didn't realize just how much of the death metal they shed away from dark metal, right? Because
Oh, dark metal, yeah.
yeah,
Yes, dark metal sounds to me. It sounds like Soulside Journey.
I can actually see that. Yeah, it would make complete sense. I mean, this band has always had very kind of like weird melodic sensibility that is very present on Soulside Journey, where Soulside Journey sounds like nothing else in death metal.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Soulside. I think that the difference between Dark Throne and Bethlehem is that Dark Throne were at a very young age. They were very accomplished musicians, and death metal, I think, is something that the death metal kind of prides itself in. Is that no matter if it's the earliest death and necrophagia, or you go to the other side now with the you know Stargazer and Mithras. It's always about like in part at least about technicality. And so there's I think the difference with black metal is that so Dark Throne are primitivists.
Mm.
They're accomplished artists who from an early age displayed great talent, and they probably have this long trajectory behind them. I don't know the full story, but judging from how Soulside sounds to me, there's a lot going on that that they really understand. Bethlehem, uh, they an interview says they're more of a naive approach. So primitivism is when a trained artist attempts to perform or create as if they had no training,
Mm.
as if they were naive, and a naive artist has no training. And it seems like Bethlehem claimed the latter.
Yeah, definitely. They were not like super skilled musicians in any shape of the sense,
Yeah,
but I think that forced them to kind of like, figure out, wait, how can we, express all these crazy ideas, you have the whole universe, what's it? Yeah, the Alexander World universe
yeah,
and everything. You have a crazy vocalist like Raina Landferman. I mean, you know, it's not something that's easy. And even then, some songs like the was it Verheißung du Krone des Todeskultes has like really obvious industrial influences. There's so much
yeah,
going on, but it's done with such a limited palette of very kind of like basic, what is it? It's like you have a few basic tremolo riffs, a few kind of like rhythmic, power chord riffs,
yes,
simple in the clean parts, very sparse, minimalistic melodies, one note at a time, a few arpeggios there. But they create
hmm
a whole universe from such simple things.
it's yeah. I would say that they. So I agree that there's a sort of minimalism. It's but perhaps the minimalism occurs in composition, but not in the execution. Bear with me for a moment. That song, it's for high song, right?
Yeah.
That's the most Dark Throne song they have,
Mm. Yeah, definitely.
and to me, it seems like the production there was different. Something with the vocals is different. They're more quiet. There's like a compression effect. Like something is different.
Yeah, there's a filter there's a filter throughout. It is
Hmm.
it is something that you were mentioning like post-punk and all that stuff. It's something I've noticed a lot
Yeah.
in that kind of like artsy rock stuff, and electronic, the post-punk where you have this kind of like telephone effect on the voice where yeah,
Yes.
where it's being like going through a filter. And this has it throughout, and it's got this. I don't know how to describe. There's this beautiful sound throughout. Well, not beautiful, but I think it's like this kind of metallic hitting, like very high pitched, kind of like
Yeah.
metallic ringing, which I absolutely love on this song. I know it's something so dumb, but it's just mixed so perfectly into it, and it really takes in the kind of space between the breakdowns, you know, because it'd be like dun 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 dun, dun you know.
Yes, yes. There's like a, I don't know if it's a sample or if it's, but yeah, I know what you mean. I did catch it as well. There was it it's it's an interesting thing because they also have this transition. I notice they're so when they compose, what I think is different is that so the production seems different. You're right. There is a filter, and there's also that pinch harmonic that returns. The song goes elsewhere completely, and
Mm.
then there's a pinch harmonic that returns the song to the main theme, and then after that is just spoken word and this keyboard part that I don't think they ever play keyboard at the same time as the rock and roll guitar part. It's just it's one of those things. They're very subtle.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they had a horn player on the first demo, which was really funny as well, which they
Huh.
she played on the first demo and just completely left the band after as well. I don't think that,
Yeah.
yeah, I think they
And
always wanted their samples, always wanted keyboards and everything, but I don't think they ever wanted it to kind of like override the rest of the music, which is why I think, they prefer to have a very kind of like, minimalistic setup, one vocalist, one guitarist, one bassist, one drummer, right? The classic four piece.
it yeah, yeah, they've and I think they really took the genre further. The vocals especially are so I think the composition. So if we talk about the relationship between the bass and the guitar, I find that so for example the intro track, the Schatten den Alexanderwelt,
Yeah.
that one has this. You'll notice there's so the the note progression on the main riff has so it's da 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 da. It leads so it's a tritone,
Mm,
and then it moves up, and I think the next thing is a minor interval,
mm,
but the resolution is so it abuses these very dark, very imperfect intervals, I think they're called. And then it so it in a way it's this uh, there is this holding, there's this it keeps itself afloat. There's this dissonance that stays, that becomes different once the clean channel part comes around. But the bass, I think it sounds to me, is doing the same thing, but the melody is further developed by the guitars with a clean channel. It's
mm.
not the same. So the first one is it has da 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 da, and the clean channel is different. It's da 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 something. It it's one of those subtle things that interest me a lot, and the way that it contrasts with the vocals, and the way the vocals don't ruin it.
Mm.
Because a lot, I think, so why I would say there is that doom metal relation, but so there it is connected to the slower side of heavy metal, but they don't sound influenced by Sabbath. I could believe Peaceville 3.
Mm.
I can believe maybe Trouble, Candlemass, the more like religion type bands, Cathedral, like the Pentagram, even, they're like
Mm.
I don't know, they're more like, I say religion, but like the word I'm trying to get for it, like it almost sounds ecclesiastical. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean, yeah.
It, and so it's interesting that the vocals don't ruin that in Bethlehem. And I can tell you, the vocals are if you compare them to the bands that they influenced, Silencer, I think, is the most immediate, most obvious one that comes to me. Silencer's vocals aren't like Bethlehem's. Silencer to me sounds like someone is trying to do a cover of Painkiller. It sounds like falsetto.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the magic thing about, Rayner's vocals, because one, they take up a massive amount of space on this album. They're
Hmm.
super important. This is one of the rare times where an extreme metal album uh works because, well, not only because of its vocals, but where the vocals have a central role. It's almost as if in many ways the album was built around the vocalist, which is completely normal in other genres, in rock, pop, funk, whatever
Yeah,
you want. But here it's like the only time it works. And I think the main thing is that he's able to do these kind of very high pitched, over the top screams, but he's got that grit in his voice still. Whereas, the silencer guy sounds like, right, I don't know how to say it. It sounds like, a child who's on a roller coaster,
it
wow, kind of
it's
nonsense.
yeah. To me, it sounds like falsetto.
Yeah.
It sounds like very raspy falsetto. It sounds really pained. I mean it. I'm not saying it's easy to do, but there's that band. There's Life Lover, who I think have a there's Life Lover, and then there's Psychonaut 4,
Mm.
who have that kind of style as well. But then there's other bands that seem to go for more effects on the vocals, for like a it which something that you would see more usually in electronic kind of music. You wouldn't hear it in black metal normally, but all of those I can kind of tell from just listening to metal that, oh, he's doing that, or I've heard this before. Bethlehem has I I I don't know how he's doing it.
It's crazy. So one of the things I actually noticed, which is really interesting, why because I think this album must have been done on a relatively small budget, right? Because
Hmm.
this was not released on any one of the big labels. I think the Adi Bakari Records probably distributed it, but this was done on a very small budget. And what
Yeah.
is really interesting is that the production is handled by Rainer Landferman, and he's
Hmm.
helped by this guy called Bernd Gast. Now, the funny thing about Bernd Gast, right, is that his only involvements as a producer and an engineer
Hmm.
is with Rainer. This is a guy like, maybe he's a producer because obviously Rainer does a lot of non-metal stuff. I'm not sure if you've heard his own like solo
I've
stuff. It's
Yeah,
really good. But he
it's
brought this
good stuff.
guy from completely outside of metal to help him with his with quite a few of his metal projects. And Bernd was like very like responsible for properly engineering the vocals. And I think ultimately, Rainer and Bernd just sat together like, look, we're gonna try to get this crazy vocal performance, get this great sound on this album. Let's do it together. So I think because you have such a great performance and you have two guys who really know how to mix, you can get something really good with minimal effects.
Yeah, yeah. I was actually thinking about this. Are you familiar with John Frusciante's first two solo albums?
Not quite. Not gonna lie, I haven't ventured down that path.
Well, uh, for being the guitar player of the Red Hot Chili Peppers, he has his solo music is diametrically opposite, and I think it attracts a different group of people. There's one song. It's it was the first. So these albums are "Smile from the Streets You Hold" and "Neanderlades," or usually just a T-shirt. And they have a performance. It's mostly just John playing the guitar and wailing. That's the he. It's they were not. I don't think he meant to release them. There's a story that he recorded them and only dropped them when he was famous enough that he could make drug money off the record sales of these albums.
Mm.
But there's one song in specific, and it's quite popular. It's called Enter a. It's just guitar, and there's only two riffs that he variates on, and he screams and wails his lungs out. It's a very tortured atmosphere, and these albums came around the time that Bethlehem were coming up as well.
Yeah.
It's just thought I'd mention it. It's something that it, you know, because we also don't want to say that Bethlehem are a rock and roll band and they don't have this metal credibility. No, it they the flair that they have, or the aesthetic inclination, can be done in other genres, which tells me it's not a hollow aesthetic gimmick that they're doing. It can be done by other musicians with entirely different interests, but it can be done in different genres. It's like saying you can play fast. You can have fast techno, or you can have fast black metal. That's kind of the thing I'm talking about here.
Yeah. Yeah, I see exactly what you mean. I mean, obviously, I think we were talking about it once, laughing about it. Yoko Ono pioneered that style, but the way she does it, it sounds like a joke. It's really hard. And what people forget, like, unlike a lot of those kind of 2000s DSBM bands that were very influenced by this album, is that Reina, he knows how to hold it in. Sometimes he just wants to narrate. He kind of
Yes.
shows a bit more chest voice, kind of going deeper. And he's not like exaggerating the screams. They still sound like good, uh, raspy, aggressive black metal screams. Like that's the hard part. And I think the only guy who's ever done something that similar, well, not similar, but I think there was a somewhat similar approach was Varg on the early
Yeah.
Burzum before Philosophem. Those kind of insane tortured screams where if you'd listen to them without context, you'd think, hey, did I stumble on some fucking like snuff shit or something?
Yeah.
And it's the exact same thing. It's a really hard thing to do, and so many people have tried doing this style, but it has ended, it's become more of a joke. I can't listen to Silencer without laughing, but even though I do like a lot of the riffs and the melodies and the ideas, but the vocals do make me laugh.
Yeah, I think there was a band. There was a band called Five Star Grave. I think they're from Italy. Who they have one vocalist that does the more, so they take a lot from like the melodeath thing, right?
Mm,
So they usually have a vocalist that, it could also be Alexi Laiho. It's that kind of style.
yeah.
But then there's another vocalist that does a falsetto, and fans call it Muppet Scream because it sounds like Elmo. It's within a context that it works, and you're like, okay, maybe I get it, but yeah, and I think that's why, it, I think I'm pretty sure it's falsetto. What's going on in Silencer, and it's the same thing that's going on in the Anal Cunt acoustic video,
Yeah.
the album.
Picnic of
It,
Love.
yeah. So I think it has its place. It does have its place, but it's very difficult to execute. And I think that for Silencer and for later DSBM bands, it, it I don't know if they realize that it's a very easy to fuck up. So there's track 2.
Yeah.
I noticed something. Speaking of samples, they use samples themselves, eh?
Yeah.
They have it, the samples at the start are like water, and then about like a half minute in, it's like that water, like you hear water, and then like 30 seconds or so, I don't know if it's a symbol or it's an actual recording of water touching like a hot pan and like evaporating, because it sounds like a sizzling sound,
Mm.
and then the symbols replicate that. It's an interesting detail, and it I think it just shows how much attention has gone into the making of this album. But yeah,
Yeah.
it, it's like a dark ballad almost. It's good.
All right, let's put it on.
Tod vermeiden heißt, das wieder Verbannung verlieren. Mein Geruch ist die Vollkommenheit. All die leeren Milchflaschen spiegeln sich in meiner Oberfläche. Ich wurde an den Fluss ausverkauft. An den roten austauschbaren Sklaven. No! Und die Erzählung wurde noch schneller! Den Grundriss hat man hingerichtet! Die schwarze Flagge schreit! Und alle Bücher wurden zerkocht.
So there's the samples that I think is the first thing, right?
Yeah.
It. I don't think that they. I don't know if that's intentional, but it's very the I think that the idea with black metal a lot of the time is to be evocative. And I think that that's what music. What I think that most musicians, when they set out to make to make their craft, I think that there is a level at which, a shallow level at which you can look at it and say, "Oh, I'm having fun, I'm vibing, or I'm dancing." But I think there's a level at which you're intentionally bringing about certain moods.
Mm.
And with this specific song, it again, the just the samples. I don't know what is necessarily meant by what is written, by how it's written, but it doesn't. I don't think it happens again in the album. I don't think they use that kind of interpretive, or it's very it's they're not using instruments for this. They're using samples. It sounds, it's almost theatrical in ways. They're not starting a song with a, they're not starting the song with an intro, like an instrumental intro, or with a spoken word. It's just nature. And I thought that was a very interesting thing to add.
Yeah, because it doesn't feel like, it's not a nature worship black metal, or, about, enduring nature or whatever. This is definitely
No.
urban black metal, to be quite honest. This is black metal
Yeah.
for the streets, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very, I think it has this biographical element, because there's it, to put it in more contemporary and North American terms, it's more hood.
Mm.
It sounds hood. And in that I mean the childhood of Jürgen is that it is this upbringing where, you know, suicides, crime, drug abuse, violence, uh, just loneliness in general. But it's not a loneliness. I think loneliness is the wrong word. As alienation. There's a separation of the human with the human's teleological ends. It's it's a questioning of human worth. Those are things that he talks about in the interviews and that are talked about in the biographical data that exists of this writer. And he calls the songs poems, which I also think it makes sense for the lyrics. The lyrics are quite poetic. It's almost like it it doesn't abide by the same pagan rules that maybe uh, the Greek metal bands. What are they? Necromantia and Varathron. They don't seem to have the same principles in mind of ancient times and nature and a pantheon of different gods. This is personal. This is inner darkness.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah. So, we're gonna have to thank Sven for taking a
Mm-hmm.
good look at this because, you know, luckily he said it. The lyrics are lost in translation, right? He said because
Yes.
they're very vague. He said it's full of oxymorons, very personal. It's like lyrics that you wouldn't understand if you weren't there, right? And there's also like the whole kind of, he's dreaming of this, Alexander world, right? Which he's always kept, for years and years. And then, but Sven also said something really funny at the same time, in that it's written in a very kind of like poetic and almost medieval German. That's what he said, which is really funny as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because it seems to go at odds of what this album is trying to express, which is a very modern sound. Like we said, there are no gods, there are no nature here. It's all about drugs, crime, violence, etc. But it's funny that I don't know, maybe because they're too personal, but it seems that there is an very obvious way, obfuscation of the lyrics, and that we are just left with kind of very vague themes and ideas of what's going on, right? As well, also because it's in German, right? And I think even by at that time, most bands, well, especially at that time, were trying to be, Anglophone rock stars, or to have English lyrics, right?
Mm-hmm. But I think that Bethlehem have had the last laugh in terms of that because they were featured alongside Absu, by the way, and others. The Gummo. Have you heard the movie Gummo?
Yes, I mean that's a really, I think I want to talk about that later on because it is part of their influence. But yeah,
Yeah.
it was during the cat torturing scene, if I remember correctly, and that
And the credits.
yeah,
There's another song of the credits.
okay,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean that was, I mean it was a very fitting one for that film, but ultimately I think Gummo does really hit on very similar themes. But then I always felt Gummo was a bit too jokey for me sometimes, and a bit too try hard for this, like wants really wanting to be edgy. I'm not sure how you felt about that film.
I figured, well, when I had the movie recommended, and I looked at it, and it seemed to me like the setting is very different from what Bethlehem come from. But at the same time, I think it's more cultural than particularly alien to the biographical, the life of the Bethlehem members. I think that the themes of youthful alienation have become increasingly common over time. Yes, Gummo probably is overplayed at times. I wouldn't really know because I don't watch enough films to really know.
Mm.
So I can't really I don't really know if it's try hard or not, but I can say it is indicative of something that has been taking place and has been getting worse over the last 60 years. And that is that finding meaning and a justification for our existence is is becoming more and more difficult. And for the younger generations, there is always this false hope being fed to them, and it is fed to them through entertainment. It is fed to them through education, education. It is fed to them through their their own mistakes, their and it is and their parents' mistakes, because hey, nobody's perfect. So I think that in situations where there is not the economic means out of that desperation, it's easy to let the difficulties of life corrupt you and make you violent and make you a dangerous person to yourself and to others.
Mm.
And it's not to say that people aren't at fault and that everyone's a holy victim, but I think that if there's something that can be said about Bethlehem, is that they were they were saved by their music. Jürgen, he might not refer to it as a God experience, and that but he did. I think people like that are lucky. They're lucky, and what happens to most people is that they don't have the talent, they don't have the sensitivity, or they don't have the means to get out of whatever they're going through. So
Mm.
I think Bethlehem should speak in ways to people who have ever felt alienated and want to come to a better understanding of reality, even if it's just for the sake of getting out of wherever they're dealing with. So, but that said, I don't find Bethlehem to be an oppressive sort of nihilistic, let's call it, band. I think that they're simply doing what has to be done.
Mm.
So they're not naturalistic in the more common black metal way, the Iljar and so on. It's more it's let nature take its course, if that makes sense. I don't know if that's making sense, but I think there's a beauty to having the talent to make something, and meeting new people, and getting out of the place that has hurt you in your childhood. That's why I think it's a fitting soundtrack to a ruined life, really.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Mm. So yeah, uh, let's pour on a final sample, get into it. I mean,
Right on.
before we move on, I actually wanted to talk about, you see, because the funny thing about that riff you chose, it's the kind of very,
Mm-hmm.
long melodic riff, right? Which also gets reused within the clean parts, because that's one thing I love about this band, is that where a lot of times it feels for a lot of other bands, especially a lot of these kind of like modern death metal bands that want to include like clean jazz parts, feels like the
Yes.
the distorted parts and the clean parts might as well be two random songs that were stuck together and mastered at the same volume. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
here, it's like, what I love about this so much is that the clean parts, like I said, they develop those melodies, they add to them, they do something with them, and it kind of creates this continuity where, the emotion, the underlying mood is always the same. It's just different levels of intensity.
Yes.
And
Yes.
And I think that's like the main magic of this band, is to create these, one really singular and unique melodies, which, like you said, I think really well, is that they do come from Dark Throne, various periods of early Dark Throne, and how they're capable of like exploiting them in a really unique way, where, clean guitar and distorted guitar are like two sides of the same coin. I think that's really like what the heart of this album, And it shows, that despite its incredible influence on that whole kind of CDR black metal genre that developed in the 2000s with all those bands we mentioned, and even like stuff like Happy Days or Make a Change, Kill Yourself, and whatever, is that you know it's just the way they put those in like clean parts with the distorted parts, and how it's like one big melodies, where with all those ESBM bands it's like, hey, we're gonna put a bunch of sad parts together, there's gonna be a little rocking riff that kind of sounds happy, but it's like haha ironic, and then hey, we're gonna shove like a 4 minute fucking clean interlude for no reason. There's not a sense of purpose, and this stands head and shoulders above DSBM because of how everything is purposeful on it.
It is very intentional. Especially there's songs where this happens in a very. I think it's a song that they played more than once throughout their discography. It's the one titled Veslerte Irreligiositet. It's German for I believe shrouded irreligiosity.
Yeah, irreligiosity. Yeah, that's the word I'm thinking. Fucking hell.
and it's and the lyrics do speak to. I think they should speak to everyone, really. I don't think that there is this, like, they're not an anti-religious band. I find they're not satanic. They don't, which I personally find a breath of fresh air.
Yeah.
And still, I think that it's an honest, more than bold and look how transgressive we are. It's direct. It's, hey, I'm an honest sinner. I can't call myself a saint. If I did, I would probably fit in amazingly with you holy doves. But I'm not a holy dove,
Yeah. See exactly what we mean. Yeah, let's put it from 230 to 310.
I would say this is the heaviest song on the album.
Definitely. I mean, this is like possibly like the most uplifting riff that they have as
Also
well.
that.
Yeah, and I love the harmony that kind of appears at the second guitar, somewhat in the
Mm-hmm.
background, that just adds to it so much. Obviously, Rayna's kind of like holding, going a bit lower than usual, sticking to the more kind of like chest voice, still screaming like a lunatic. And this is really interesting, like very rhythmic kind of I wouldn't say, it's not quite a thrasher, but it's approaching that level, right? Very active, energetic riff.
Right. Yeah, it you can feel the bass. I think that what makes them such great writers is that they're not going for this complex counterpoint where now you can hear this and then you can hear that. Everything has its place. Everyone knows what they're doing when they're doing it, and the instruments. So the bass playing is not hidden behind. It's not just following. It's it comes up where it has to, and yeah, you're right. It there is a coherent harmony. It is very yeah, it's uplifting, really. It and the way that the riff evolves, you almost don't notice it. You almost feel like you're listening to one very long melody.
Mm.
It's very well executed.
Yeah, I mean that's another reason why this band is so so impressive is that they don't need to loop an idea a million times to kind of get their point across. They're capable of like very coherently just developing a melody throughout its runtime, adding things to it,
Mm-hmm.
subtracting things from it, and manage to get to a really logical point. These songs are really like, in the purest sense, like narratives. I understand what he means by poems, right? Because they really do follow the structures of a poem where it starts somewhere, it goes through a journey, it starts in a state of equilibrium, goes through some kind of like tumultuous journey and ends up in, some weird state of balance.
Yeah, and they never bomb. That's what is so great to me about this band is that they don't bomb. It's like, bro, you're screaming and you're playing rather aggressive riffs, and it. You see, here's the thing: a lot of reviewers, critics, fans, they'll make a video about them because they're Bethlehem. You have to talk about them.
Mm,
But they will be dismissed as a novelty act. You'll say, "Oh wow, this is so extreme," and go right the fuck back to a monomarth.
yeah.
And that's fine. That's fine. But then don't talk about things you don't like. It's dishonest. And so for that, I find that they're a very misunderstood band.
Mm,
They're not so that's I when you hear musicians say, or they say, do what sounds good. Bethlehem understand what that means. They know, the minor scale is already there. You know, it there's restraint, there's precision, they are able to do what they did well in one song. They're able to do it again in another,
mm.
and that for me, that means a lot, because the epigons of this style, they they do what they do well, but they don't do what Dictius does. It, it's I don't know. They're a very unique band.
Yeah, this is an album that will always I think you said something really interesting, which is why its influence is so big, because the kind of mainstream metal world does look at it as a novelty. They are pointing their fingers at it, like, wow, so crazy, wow, vocals. Okay, sure,
Yeah,
vocals, and then they kind of ignore it, and that led
yeah.
to a huge stream of copycats. But nothing in this style, right, has come quite close to it, and
Mhm. Yeah.
even like the kind of the fact that it kind of loses all genre tags is really impressive as well. It doesn't fit into any kind of to any form of
No.
categorization. I think it does straddle quite a bit closer to black metal more than anything else and doom, but it doesn't.
Yeah.
It's not pure in any sense. It doesn't kind of define uh itself as a single style, and its influence has like it's transcendental in the fact that its influence is so omnipresent in so many different styles and bands, right?
Yeah.
You can feel its kind of shock, like the shock waves emitted by this release a few years after it came out, a bit in multiple genres. A lot of the bands are kind of like, that fashioned themselves as dark metal. That mixed death and black metal were very inspired by this. Of course, on the label side, we've worked with quite a few bands in that genre as well,
Mhm.
like the DSBM we've been talking about, which completely. I always felt that those guys completely misunderstood this album, and even a lot
Yeah.
of experimental and
Mhm.
avant-garde stuff. You can kind of trace a lot of those roots back to here. It is an album that it's like. Yeah, it's like Nesbit. It is like a kind of black metal version of Nesbit, where huge influence, kind of people. Well, it's different because Nesbit, like people started listening to that in like 2015, 2016, right? Because of the DLA. But yeah, no, but this one was like imitated since its release, and like Nesbit, no one has quite gotten their finger on the pulse yet. You know,
No, they haven't. And even with the production, there's so much reverb in the in the drums, especially.
Yeah.
For me, there are some bands. There's Demilich for sure, who man, like there, that music will invade your dreams.
Mm.
It will define, like it's very evocative music, but it's something that will define a lot of your perception. It's if
Yeah.
you pay attention to it, and if you're lucky enough that album finds you, I mean, it's a very progressive album. Nespida. I would say it's as much a prog metal album as it is a death metal album,
Yeah.
because it does do things that other bands won't. And Dictius Te Necare is also like that. They have very specific things that you can imitate, but the principle behind them, you can make a top down deconstruction of dark metal, of Dictius Te Necare, and have music, even good music. But I wouldn't understand why you would want to do that as a musician if that's not you. That's my, you weren't brought up in 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 a low income neighborhood in Germany. You're not German. You might have different intense experiences that attract you to that music, but they're those experiences. It's just not right to want to fully imitate something. You can be very inspired by them, and I'm sure that's what many bands would say. But the principle is different.
Yeah,
It's
exactly. These guys were like probably ordering,
yeah,
sending checks to like dodgy magazines in hope that they get a cassette, or they ask someone who knows someone, "Hey man, do you have a My Dying Bride cassette?" And then you get, and it's like a third generation cassette because it's been fucking recorded from another cassette. And you listen to this, and they listen to this shit, and it's like, and you can barely make out what's going on because there's so much static, and that just leaves enough space for your own imagination and interpretation.
yeah. I think it's a sign of the times. I don't know. I mean, obviously, there's always new music coming out,
Mm.
but of this sort, with this much, with this much, work on into it, it's like I was saying earlier. I don't believe in youth culture. I think that's entirely manufactured, but that doesn't mean that people don't want to do good by themselves even at a young age. And Bethlehem are not a band that would be critically acclaimed in their time. They, I think that they had the problem with censorship, which was the first issue,
Mm.
and then with, it was seen as dangerous music. But then also, I think that black metal. I was thinking about this. What's more unholy? if we're gonna talk against black metal or for black metal, is you know, if you actually wrote this down, it's if you have a church, yes, or a
Mm,
temple, what what do you think? You know, it has a purpose. You go there to pray, right?
mm,
And I think black metal, Bethlehem. So the music, I think the music in Bethlehem is more uplifting than it is depressing. It might abuse minor scales, it might abuse tritones, it might have very intense vocals,
mm,
but it ultimately it evolved and it led to it seems like it led the band to better places.
mm,
Now there will be detractors, and you know, not just religious detractors. There will be detractors who say it's low vibrational and it only discusses calamity, and then those same people will run back to their fucked up lives and say that their avoidance of the darkness is embracing reality of life. Well, they still don't prosper. They're just not embracing any possibility of change. So there can be something to say just morally about this whole matter, whether it's holy or not. It's wrestling with God. I'm going to leave it at that. I don't think it has to blaspheme to wrestle with God, because that is a, you know, and think about it. Have Protestant churches in the time of Varg and today in Norway, have they not been completely inverted in their values? You know, they it's, you know, they have turned the house of God in a place of iniquity. And so, okay, Varg is not a Christian. He would not support Christianity. But did God not allow the destruction of the first temple as well? Because the Hebrews were not worshiping as they should?
mm.
Just food for thought.
Definitely. All right, perfect. Any final words before we head out?
No, no, that's pretty much it.
Yeah. So R.I.P. Jürgen, fantastic,
R.I.P.
inimitable classic. Something
Indeed.
we'll keep listening to for a long time. Perfect. Thank you very much, Fiello.
Thank you so much, Nick. Thanks for having me. And cute dog, by the way.
Thanks.